All right, and welcome back to One Stop Central. I'm Kyle,
I'm Mike Parker.
and this is our guest.
My name's Kate.
You want
Um,
to tell us a little bit about yourself? Sorry.
yeah. So I'm a current senior at Naperville Central High School. I also happen to be the president of Naperville Central High School's JSA club, or our Junior State of America chapter.
Very nice. Oh,
Yeah. So what is JSA exactly? I'm not very familiar with the club.
Yeah, so JSA basically stands for the Junior State of America, and it's an organization dedicated to political discourse between high school students, as well as activism and where we can get involved. It technically comprises a branch of chapters across the country. The Naperville Central High School JSA chapter is located in the Midwest state of JSA, and we try and get involved in yearly conventions while also doing things on a local level as well.
what kind of things do you guys debate in the club?
So it's usually about politics, but it can really range from like different types of topics every week. So typically we can talk about like things that are current events that are really popular or in the news a lot. We can also talk about things that are affecting the social scene, but sometimes we also talk about things like international relations, foreign policy, economics, etc.
What do you think differentiates JSA from other political clubs at school?
I think that one of the interesting things about JSA is that it's definitely not something that people have to be super pressured or feel like super qualified in order to join. Right now in school, I think there are a couple of clubs that are dedicated to just like making sure that people stay on top of like current events and are aware of what's happening in the world. Some of those clubs include like our Congressional Debate Club. I would also say Model UN and our mock trial team also do a good job at making sure that students stay up to date and know what's important in the world of current events. But I would also say that from my personal experience, in order to join those clubs, it is quite competitive. You do have to stay on top of like mastering certain skill sets, and you do have to like have weekly commitments, and it's a pretty competitive atmosphere to the point where it might become like a source of stress in your life. I think the interesting thing about JSA is that JSA is really whatever you want to make it out to be. It can definitely be something that you choose to get very involved with, but at the same time, it can also be a low stress and very welcoming group that anybody can just drop into. You definitely don't have to have a speech prepared. You don't have to like have read the news every day for like 7 weeks straight in order to join. It's really just an environment where you drop in and sort of like talk about what you think on a certain event. You don't have to have any research. You don't have to compete in like tournament like structures, and you don't have to do anything you don't want to. At the end of the day, I think JSA is focused on making sure that everybody knows that regardless of what their political affiliation, values, or thoughts are, they deserve to have a platform and an environment to voice those thoughts. And that's what JSA is really dedicated to.
It's cool. So I know you, Kyle, you're also in JSA. What got you guys both to get into JSA in the first place? Like, is there like a story that happened, or did you guys just kind of fall in?
Oh, oh, Kyle, do you
No,
want
no, I
to
was
go
gonna say
first?
you should go first for the guest.
Okay, sure. I mean, I think the very first time I sort of like happened to land into JSA was my sophomore year. Um, it was really just because like at that time I heard about JSA and I thought it sounded interesting. Like they did this thing where they like they announced what JSA was like every week on the announcement, so it was kind of hard to miss. So I just dropped into one of those meetings, and it was a nice environment because it was one of those like low stress sort of activities where you can talk about what you want, where everybody's like friendly and they want to like meet you and know who you are. And that same year, I decided to like apply to Midwest Cabinet. As I mentioned earlier, JSA is divided into like states across the country. Naperville Central's JSA chapter is part of the Midwest state, and Midwest Cabinet is essentially like um, it's almost like an executive group that organizes conventions every year, but because it is student led, it comprises student leaders. I applied to be a part of cabinet, and that was like a really eye opening experience because for the first time, um, it allowed me to have like a more important role in managing and having a say in like the sorts of activities that I was taking part in. And that was really unique because like I think so often throughout high school, you're sort of just plodding along. You don't get like a role in the decision-making process. You sort of have to do what the higher ups tell you. There's a structure and you have to fit that structure. If you're in Midwest JSA, if you're on any sort of like position in Midwest JSA, because it's a student-led organization, you get a say in how it's run. And that was just like really a breath of fresh air, I think, in high school. And on top of that, because Midwest Cabinet is structured in such a manner that it draws from students in Michigan and Wisconsin, all across Illinois, you definitely meet people with differing political values, who have different backgrounds and different beliefs than yours. And I think it really helps break you out of the Naperville bubble and like sort of expose you to all of those different backgrounds. So that was another reason why I really wanted to stick in JSA. So I would say that I sort of stumbled upon it by chance, and then it was like all of the different things about JSA that sort of kept me in there.
My brother was in it. Yeah, just my brother was in it. I thought it was interesting. Freshman year, I joined 15 other clubs. Would not suggest that to any freshman. And just from there, I stuck with JSA because it was one of the few of the clubs that I joined that was able to voice my own opinion and hear other people's actual thoughts on it rather than what research shows. So, like you said about breaking out of the Naperville bubble, I mean, research is important to your opinions, but it kind of fails in like a lot of those clubs that they're trying to rather get points for whatever they're doing it for, say, congressional debate. It kind of felt that they were really good at debating, and everyone that's in it is really good at it. But it kind of a lot of it was trying to get points to get better at that speaking portion rather than voicing what you actually believe. And I think JSA for me was just getting those opinions out and hearing what someone actually believes and why. So that's why. So recently there was the Winter Congress. You want to talk about what the Winter Congress is and what the different stuff like that is, the conventions?
Yeah, so Winter Congress is typically one of the largest conventions that's held for Midwest JSA throughout the entire school year. Typically, what would happen in a normal school year if COVID-19 wasn't like, a thing, is that students would just fly over to Washington, D.C., and they would participate in like this mock congressional simulation where they're trying to like act as actual legislators and pass their bills through Congress. Because we couldn't go to DC in person this year, instead we held it online. And we combined with two other JSA states, SoCal and the ORV. SoCal stands for Southern California, the ORV stands for the Ohio River Valley. So while I would say that it's a bit of a disadvantage in that you unfortunately don't get to see DC in person, delegates this year did have a chance to literally see people from across the country. And throughout like Winter Congress, I would say that it was like really incredible to see that even though people weren't in person, it was incredibly engaging. Everybody like had their hands raised. They were trying to speak and during each block, which is essentially like, it's almost like a period where you're trying to just like speak on a certain bill. Everybody was like clamoring to participate. There were some fierce debates. And we were really getting into like the ins and outs of each individual bill. We were talking about things like from legalizing prostitution to the viability of certain like gun policy legislation. And it was really just like a great opportunity to see all of the different voices of the people around you. And additionally, it's a really great opportunity to actually see specific viewpoints of different parties. This year, as is slightly different from other years, we had 4 parties that were actually represented by student delegates. In a normal year, you would have individual students trying to represent the Republican and Democratic Party. But this year, we also had students represent the Libertarian Party as well as the Socialist Party. So throughout Winter Congress, you would just hear like party whips and party chairs just trying to explain their party platforms. And that was really interesting to actually gain insight on how a libertarian thinks or how a socialist might approach a bill differently and what their common values ultimately are. We also had the ability to listen to a keynote speaker that maybe we normally wouldn't be able to. We got the chance to listen to Stacey Abrams, who, as you like might have heard of, played a pretty massive role in like the elections this year. So that was a really cool opportunity. And of course, Winter Congress isn't complete without like the social blocks. There were definitely periods of time where we weren't necessarily only debating bills and just like sitting in chambers. We also got the opportunity to just converse as regular high schoolers with people across the country. So all in all, a pretty exciting experience in my opinion.
So with the talk about bills, and I know about this, but normally what do the other conventions look like?
So in normal other conventions, we wouldn't like be trying to act as members of Congress. Instead, we would be just like debating resolutions that are drafted by the debate department, which, like every other department in Midwest JSA, does comprise student leaders, so normal high schoolers just like you and me. So the majority of the convention, I would say, would probably go over to debate, but there's also activism portions that would be built into each portion of the convention, whether that's creating an entirely separate block to have an activism activity or just building in activism to each and every debate. Some activism initiatives in the past have included like writing letters, for example, to our congressional representatives, learning more about what we can do to like help those in mental health crises. We recently in Winter Congress, for example, had a block about like consumer power and how we should be voting with our dollars and what impact we can have in the economy, and to basically just buy things in an ethical manner. So that would be like what a typical activism initiative looks like. We would also have the opportunity to listen to guest speakers. Typically, Midwest JSA does invite like individuals that are from like local regions. These could be politicians, these could be legislators, these could be local activists, and they typically come from areas that are relevant to the Midwestern JSA population, if that makes sense. And then on top of that, there would also be like regular social blocks at Fall State, for example, which is another large convention that's organized by Midwest JSA throughout the year. It isn't necessarily as pronounced as the social blocks in Winter Congress, just because it is sort of expected that because it would be a Midwest only event, more people would know each other. So there would be a less of a need to like have an extremely drawn out social block. But all in all, like your typical convention would consist of debates, activism, guest speaking, and having the opportunity to socialize with your fellow delegates.
Do you have any fun experiences for any of these conventions that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think like something that definitely like flew to the top of my mind as soon as I heard that question was like, this recent activity I had, or not activity that I had, it was like this recent activity I participated in Winter Congress. And it was a social block. And like as an individual member who's currently on Midwest Cabinet, I can fully say that from the planning side of things, this wasn't ideal because when we were planning it, like because of the timings, since Southern California lives in Pacific Standard Time, ORB lives in Eastern Time. So like some of the things that would have worked better in Central Time and PST did not shape out well in like the Eastern Time zone. So we had like a night block, which is basically like a socializing block meant to engage delegates from across the country. That block ran from like 8 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. Eastern time. So it was like literally midnight by the time the block finished, and you still had to like get up early to like participate in the convention the next day. So all of us like on Midwest Cabinet were super worried that people would just be dropping like flies. They would be sleeping. They would not be engaged in like a 3-hour Zoom call, literally after an entire day of just sitting on Zoom to try and debate bills. But instead, what happened was I hopped onto a Zoom room during this block that literally ran until 11:30 p.m. Eastern time. And we just started talking about like the craziest things. We started opening up and we talked about like whether or not like it's better to shower in the morning or to shower at night with like these random prompts, right? And then after that, we started talking about like the College Board and testing because again, we're high schoolers and I guess testing is just an inevitable like thing that we all circulate back toward. And then we got involved in a super heated discussion about whether or not the College Board should be abolished. There were some fierce rants, as is prone to happening when you have two fierce debaters in a room, I suppose. And then after that, we just started cycling into like really deep philosophical things that I did not expect would happen at 11:30 p.m. We started talking about whether or not revolution or reformation is better, to what extent our society can actually be moral when we're currently like existing on a system in which it like when we're currently existing in the United States, which was founded upon like at the very least an incredibly unethical system of labor. So it was just crazy. Like we kept on talking for like 3 hours straight. And at the end of the period, we all just decided to like share our phone numbers over the Zoom chat as well as our socials. So now we have a group chat up and running. So in 3 hours, I was able to meet people from across the country and drag my poor ORVers into a midnight discussion. So that's like a pretty fun moment for me.
I wish I went there. I just played Among Us for an hour. Mike, any questions you have?
Yeah. So what topics are you guys like personally interested in? Like, I would assume there's like a lot of different like broad topics you guys talk about within JSA. What are some of the like peak interest ones for you guys?
I think that's a really good question. And I'm gonna give like a kind of bad answer and just say that like um my penchant for topics like really just changes depending on the type of people that are within like a certain like debating within a certain act like block or certain resolution. I really like I'm like engaged in pretty much everything. I really like learning about economics, talking about foreign policy, discussing like what are arguably some pretty controversial domestic topics. Also, just talking about like electoral affairs. So whatever you can think of that's within like the broad realm of politics, I'd probably be like at least a little bit interested in. But I think at the end of the day, it's really like the people that make a debate really incredibly engaging. I remember, and like personally, like a debate that you can like is different in many different ways. When I think of like debates that stand out in my mind, I wouldn't necessarily first think of like the word like when I'm thinking about a debate that stands out. One thing that comes to mind is like a debate I participated in my sophomore year at Fall State. The resolution was ICE should be abolished. And people, as you might expect, there were a lot of people speaking pro and speaking con. So basically, a lot of people like arguing, yes, ICE should be abolished. No, ICE shouldn't be abolished. And in the same debate, we basically had individuals talking about like their backgrounds and their experiences. One person like described their personal experiences with like border control essentially, and how they as like a member of the Latino community felt whenever like ICE came up in the discussion. And in the same debate, you basically had another like delegate that was talking about their personal experiences because their parents worked in border control, and basically like you had two people from very opposing sides. And they like sort of came together to discuss like their common values and like common ground between the two of them. And I wouldn't necessarily like you don't like that debate in the same way that you would like a humorous debate about whether or not like dogs should wear pants or something like that, right? You have like differing types of enjoyment and like differing types of debates. But those debates really stick out to you because it's one of the first moments where like somebody in your own age group dares to be that vulnerable, and it really does feel like you learn more than you would just reading about somebody's opinion on the web or on the internet. So like those are the debates that definitely stick out to me. But on another level, there's also like the lighthearted, funny, humorous topics where like I literally saw somebody just go off in a rant about how they really, really, really liked Bernie Sanders, but they didn't like his hairstyle. Somebody was talking about like arguing fiercely about why like mustard is a better condiment than ketchup. You have debaters arguing that, you know, like lemonade is a type of juice. It's just like JSA is just a conglomeration of so many different things. So it's okay to like the different things that pop up.
I think my favorite one of those funny debates was my freshman year. Someone made a debate. I don't think this was like an actual thing. It was during one of the social blocks. It was just turned to a big thing. It was if we should get rid of Florida as a state, like just get off the map. That was pretty funny. That was awesome. And I agree with you a lot with JSA, whether it's funny or if it's like a very serious topic, no matter what, you're going to learn about a lot of other people. And even if you don't personally get to know them, like you don't, like you said, get like a group chat or learn their names or anything like that, you're going to learn a lot about the world or our country and more because you're hearing from other people's thoughts and opinions. Any closing thoughts on JSA? Anything you'd like to say?
It's never too late to join. If you do want to join, if you listened and you're interested, just email me. My email is kjli and then @stu.naperville203.org. And I would be really happy to see any like newcomers. So yeah, closing thoughts.
All right. We'll actually put the you want us to put your email in the comments below so I can contact?
Yeah, sure, I can do that.
All right, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Well, thank you all for joining us today on One Stop Central, and we'll see you next time.